Hello, I'm Daniel Meyer, Artistic Director of the Lakeside Symphony Orchestra, and it is a great pleasure to be with you today to celebrate this, the second of our virtual programs, talking about music, talking about the Lakeside Symphony, talking about all the wonderful things that go on in the music world. And of course, many of you already saw our performance with Isabel Dernberg and her father, Christopher. And it is a great honor and pleasure to be with Max Rabinovitsj today. And of course, many of you already know Max as a longtime Lakesider, and you probably also know that he's probably best known in his former life as the concertmaster of the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. And of course, he wore many other hats and continues to wear many musical hats as we speak today. And I'm thrilled to be with you, Max, today and get a chance to talk to you. Welcome.
Thank you. First of all, let me say that what you've done with the orchestra in the little amount of time that you've been with them is just remarkable. And they love you. They are inspired by you. You get the most out of them. I conducted them once, and I know what it takes to get the result that you have. And honestly, we are very, very fortunate to have you here. Besides that, you're a good-looking guy. So,
well, I have to admit that I was really, really looking forward to being back this summer, and of all the summer festivals and all of my activities conducting wise that had been pretty much canceled from when we shut down in the middle of March, this was the kind of the last holdout. The Lakeside Symphony program was still on the books, and even when we decided to social distance and try to create a season that would fall under the CDC guidelines. Then we even created a chamber orchestra program, and then we finally got to the decision that it was probably just a little too risky to put everybody together, because I think maybe not every Lakesider knows that we're assembling an orchestra from all over the world. Many of them come from far reaches of the United States. A good bulk of musicians reside here in Ohio, but many of them don't. So we're essentially putting together a little all-star team in the summer to be together for 2 or 3 weeks. And unfortunately, we weren't able to do it this time. But I wanted to just take this opportunity to dig a little bit deeper and let people know a little bit more about their neighbor when they do get a chance to see you on the street or walking by, and talk a little bit about your past. But before we do that, we should probably mention that there was a very important musical figure who just passed away, and the music world is the poorer for it. Can you tell us a little bit about who we're talking about, Max?
Leon Fleischer?
Right.
Yes. It's been the last few years I've lost Michael Tree from the Guarneri Quartet, who was my roommate, Curtis. And that was a big shock to me. We're the same age. And Leon, I just saw 2 years ago. I was at his 90th birthday, and in Vermont at Yellow Barn, where he was teaching. So many of his closest friends, Jamie Laredo and so on, we were all there for his 90th birthday, and he played Clair de Lune. And honestly, a more beautiful sound you cannot imagine. It's just it's magic what he just played a note on the piano and finger went down, and there's a sound that just comes up, the way you totally non-percussion.
Yeah.
Not this, but this. And the sound comes out dark, gorgeous. And he played it with such feeling. So there wasn't a dry eye in the place. And I was thinking, what can I play for Leon? I live in Naples, Florida, and his son is the harpist of the Naples Symphony. So Dickie, he's called. And he has 2 sisters who play the harp. Had a grandfather who was the harpist for the Chicago Symphony for 2,000 years. And so I'm close to the family. The first time I played with Leon was actually in Cincinnati. And so that was 1961. That's how far back I go with him. Then he played many times with St. Louis, which was I was concertmaster later of St. Louis. And then I moved from St. Louis. I went to the University of Texas. And for some reason, my wife had passed away, and I just wanted to get out of St. Louis. So I went to the University of Texas and started pretty much the string department there. And Leon Fleischer was going to conduct the Austin Symphony. And I was lucky enough, and he asked me to play. So I played Beethoven with him because, playing Beethoven with Leon is like studying the Bible with Moses. It's quite something. Every note has a meaning. There's just no such thing as letting it go, you see. And
I had
so,
a, I remember, Max, I had a great opportunity to spend just a couple sessions with Mr. Fleischer. I was a conducting student at Aspen Music Festival. And as you mentioned, of course, in addition to being a brilliant pianist, he also did quite a bit of conducting. And so he wanted to talk to the conductors from a musician's perspective and talk to us about what we should be going after in our music making. I mean, I don't think he mentioned a thing about where our hands should be or the way that we should move our bodies. That wasn't his deal. He was so much more about what can we do to draw out the music, how we should think about phrasing. Of course, he used the piano many times to demonstrate what he was after. But I wish I had taken a video recording or had some sort of recording device to get down every bit of wisdom it was like an encyclopedia, just spurting off all these incredible little pearls of wisdom and making references to famous concerti and famous pieces that he knew very, very well. It was like a master class with just him in the room, and we all just sat there as if kind of in awe of this incredible musical mind.
yes, you're not going to find another person like that. I've been lucky. I've worked with such great musicians, and I still think that, of course, we all go back to our beginnings. And my era, I mean, it's incredible luck that, for instance, one of my violin teachers was a student of Rimsky-Korsakov. So here I am, we're talking about 140 years ago, and I'm a direct second generation from Rimsky-Korsakov. So how many people get that kind of luck, you see? And this was a wonderful era with lots of mistakes that we made. We played Bach and Mozart, very Russian-like and very romantic, and with the vibrato, and there was, so we played Bach, you played. So of course I don't play like that anymore, thank goodness. But a lot of it got knocked out of me when I moved to Europe. I moved to Europe in 1980, and I stayed in Europe forever after that until I married my Mary, and you have a Mary, I have a Mary, and she's American, and we came back to the States. So I came back here in 2006, and she had this house in Lakeside. That's how I ended up in Lakeside. You see.
That's your Lakeside connection.
What's that?
Oh, that's your Lakeside connection. I didn't even know.
Yes.
I would first come to
Yes. I came here. Nobody could pronounce my name, and nobody cared. So it really, I mean, I was anonymous for so long. And somehow somebody asked for me to relate my life story. And then the word got around, there's this guy here. And so that's what happened.
Well, getting back to Fleischer, I know there was a little piece that you thought might be a nice.
Yes, just something that is very personal. It's totally internal. So it's from Gluck.
Thank you so much, Max. That was really beautiful and kind of a nice, fitting tribute to an incredible mensch and an incredible musician and someone who touched so many musical lives. Um, Before we get, I wanted to get an opportunity to talk to you a little bit about some of these amazing artists that you had a chance to work with over the span of your career. But before we do that, just for those that don't know your story, maybe we can start. Well, let's start at the top. I mean, do you remember the first time that you picked up a violin?
Yes.
Did you admire somebody who was already playing, or did you just say, "I want to
I,
play the violin"? Or how did you even get started?
you know, I was in Brussels during the war, the Second World War.
Mhm.
So I was what they call a hidden child, although I didn't really hide very much. And there was a crowd going into a building, and I wanted to know what it was about. And so I went in backwards and snuck in, and it was a violinist playing.
Wow.
And I was almost 8 years old, and I said, "Yeah, that's phenomenal." So I looked for a way to study the violin, you see. And my father at the time was the head of sabotage in the resistance. So he is the one really that protected me during the war, in that he would say, "Okay, Max, you go, and this is the address, you go there." And I would go there and I'd stay there as long as he felt that it was safe. So it just meant that somebody wouldn't tell other people, "I think there's a little Jewish boy hiding there." Otherwise, then the Gestapo would come. So that's what I did. And he found this man who played the violin, who was also Jewish and hiding. He said, "Why don't you go with him?" So I started, and I don't remember how long I had lessons with him. It was just months. It was not a year. And he was unfortunately taken. And he, I've never known about what happened to him, but I just surmised that he didn't make it.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's how I started. And then um, it went from there. After the war, um, I auditioned for the Royal Conservatory of Brussels. And there was a Jewish pianist and myself, and we were both like 12 and a half. And you had to be 18 to get in. It was like a university. And so they accepted both of us. And so I had never gone to school. I didn't go to school. I was in first grade, I think, 2 months, and the war began, and then at the end of the war, I went back to sixth grade, and I think maybe I had 4 months of sixth grade, and then I went to the conservatory. And there, the famous Queen Elizabeth competition. Well, that Queen Elizabeth took both the pianist and myself in hand, And we both we had to go to the palace every day. The conservatory was 2 blocks away from the palace. And so we had to go to the palace every day and work with the same teacher that the princes had, the 2 future kings. Okay, so we were all the same age. And there was a great teacher. He was a teacher who never had a book. He took out the newspaper of the day and he would say, okay, let's go. What page would you like to go to? It doesn't matter. So if it was talking about finances, we'd do math. If it was talking about geography, we do that. If we're talking, there's a story and there was a word that we didn't understand, so we learned Latin that day. It was in Greek. And so we had an incredible education. Incredible, you see. And then my mother could not stand being in Belgium. Too many memories of all of her family that passed away. So my father decided we had to leave. And that's how I ended up in the United States then.
And where did you settle when you came to the US, Max?
Oh, I came from Brussels. I don't know if you've been to Brussels, but it's one of the most beautiful cities. It's got a square that's now, it's a Renaissance marvel. And so where the palaces and everything, so beauty was all around me. And then I ended up in the States in Camden, New Jersey.
Wow.
Yes. Need I say more? I was back at a war because, it was the most anti-Semitic place you can imagine. And I had gangs go after me every single day. So if you want a quick story, I'll tell you a quick story that's more fun than music. I didn't know what to do to protect myself because the Canada was divided between RCA Victor and Campbell Soup. Campbell Soup, everybody was Polish. It's okay. My mother was Polish, so don't start getting mad. And the RCA Victor was all Italian. You see, both very Catholic and both very anti-Semitic. They're not anti-Semitic once they have education, but at this level, it was very anti-Semitic. And so I didn't know how to survive. And of course, Camden was mostly Black. And both the Blacks were hated by everybody. So I didn't speak English yet. So I saw these Black kids always playing basketball. So I went up to them and I said, I don't know what I said, but made it clear that I wanted to play basketball with them. See? And so they laughed. They never had a white kid ask him to play basketball, but since I couldn't speak English, they named me Belge. They said, so okay, Belge, you can play. So I played with them every day.
Wow.
I was in love with basketball. And one day I had like 8 kids come after me. And when I played the next day with them, I said, I just don't know what to do. It's a good thing I can run faster than everybody, but how am I going to survive this? So the following day, there's a man that rings the doorbell, and I open the door, and there's the most immense person I've ever seen in my life, just enormous. And I said, yes. He said, you're Max? I said, yes. He says, I hear you're having problems. My son tells me you're having problems. I said, yes. He says, don't worry. You will not have any more problems.
Wow.
So it was Jersey Joe Walcott.
Oh my gosh.
You know who that is?
I've heard the name, yeah.
He was the #1 heavyweight champion of the world.
Wow.
He was heavyweight champion of the world. Never left Camden. Oh, became the guru of young kids forever. And took care of them, took druggies and helped them out. And now Camden is on the way up and doing very well with the police and everything else. So it's a success story, but it took half a century.
Did the kids who you played basketball with, did they know you were also playing the violin? Did anybody have this idea that you had this double life as a basketballer and a violin player?
Not at all. Not at all. And just just before I left Camden, I played a concert, and I invited them all, and that's they were sitting together, and that's how they learned that I played the violin.
That's such an incredible story. I love it.
Yeah, sure.
Let's fast forward a little bit to music school, because this is where you got a chance to meet some of these luminaries and really make chamber music with them and kind of forge some long-term friendships.
Yes.
Where did you do your undergraduate work?
Undergraduate sounds like you have me going to college. I've been a full professor in several universities, but I don't have a college degree.
Oh.
Yes, it doesn't happen too often. But I was chairman of departments and everything else, and I was lucky. So I have only a degree from Curtis Institute of Music. That's what I have.
In Philadelphia.
And, what's that?
In Philadelphia, for those who don't know.
Yes. So that's my schooling, and I stopped from Camden. I was really very upset with everything, and I stopped playing the violin for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So when most people learn all the concertos, I stopped.
Well, it's even more astonishing then that you were able to get into Curtis, considering that layoff in your playing. I mean, that's usually when kids are really pounded upon by their parents to practice their scales.
So there you are. So I'm good. You never know with me what we're going to talk about. So here I am. I'll make it as fast as I can. I decided to give up the violin. I went to work at Gimbel Brothers in Philadelphia, selling ladies' shoes in the basement. Most expensive pair of shoes, $5. I still to this day held all the records for the most sales in one day. I sold 5,000 pairs of shoes. Wow. I'll tell you how I did it someday, some other time. We don't have time, but I swear to you that it's true. And there I was, and there was a violist who at the time was playing in the New Orleans Symphony. I ended up in Pittsburgh, where you are, with the Pittsburgh Symphony. His name was Norman Wallach, and passed away. But so he somehow decided that it wasn't right that I was in shoes. And he came to see me at Gimbel's. He said, let's go and have lunch together. I said, okay. So he said, you mind if I stop at the violin maker on the way to lunch? He said, I've got to pick up an instrument. So we go there, and he says to Mr. Mennick from Philadelphia, he says, here, this is Max. He says, he needs a violin and a bow. So he gives me a violin and a bow. He says, let's go upstairs. We go upstairs, and there's a conductor sitting on the couch. And he was the concertmaster of the Philadelphia Orchestra under Stokowski. And he was now the conductor of the New Orleans Symphony. See, so here we are. And he says, you're going to play for me? I said, I had no idea I was going to play. I haven't played the violin in 2.5 years. I said, I don't know what I'm doing here. So Norman says, you play for him. Sure. So I figured, what can I start? I haven't played the violin for, okay, I figured something safe. So I started an open G string. How can I miss that, right? So I started. So that's what I started with. And then I played as much as I could remember, and I left it. I said, I don't want to have lunch with you. I never want to speak to you. I said, it's finished. You're not my friend anymore. And 2 days later, I got a telegram from the New Orleans Symphony saying, we will offer you a job, last stand, second violin on the inside.
Wow.
You couldn't get any lower, you see. And so there I was, and I started to practice. The first symphony that they played was Brahms' Second Symphony. Oh. And still to this day, that's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard in my life. Yeah. Right there. Yeah. And I started practicing, and then, I got back into shape.
Had you ever played in an orchestra before that moment of playing in the back of the second violins of the New Orleans Symphony?
No.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah. So that was that. So at the end of that year, he offered me assistant concertmaster because he started to teach me. But he said, I think you should, you're 21 almost. He says, they don't take anybody over 21 at Curtis. But I'll talk to Zimbalist, and you should study with him. So he said, in the meantime, I'll send you to Marlborough, and you study with Casals and Serkin and all these people, and get going with the chamber music. And that's how I got back in. It just total luck like that.
Luck, and I mean, I'm sure you were deeply embarrassed when he set you up for that situation to have to play violin at the violin shop.
Yes.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that always fascinates me, Max, and I love talking to musicians about this is what are they listening for? What is it that makes it great? What sorts of things distinguish a really top player or top musician from an average player or an amateur? And I think all of us who aspire to making better music look towards those idols. And you had a chance to rub elbows with some of those idols and actually play chamber music with them. And I thought maybe we could play. I'd like to play a little clip of some great artists and then get your reaction to it. This is a video with the great cellist Pablo Casals on the podium, and of course he doesn't have a cello in his hands at this point. I believe it's his own festival, right, that he's conducting at. And the violinist, of course, is none other than the great Isaac Stern, and the cellist is the great Leonard Rose, who was on the faculty at Curtis for many years, and the pianist. Shoot, I've just drawn a blank. Easterman, that's right, Eugene Easterman. They're all playing the Beethoven Triple Concerto. So let's take a moment to listen to this and watch this, and then I want to get your reaction to this playing. So here's these three luminaries with Pablo Casals on the podium playing an excerpt from the Beethoven Triple Concerto for piano, violin, cello, and orchestra. Wow, it's just incredible to have those documents. We're so grateful that we're able to have access to these sorts of things now. And I know a lot of my students and my musicians always seek out this era, particularly of musician, because I mean, there's such incredibly assured performances. They are so beautifully wrought. It may be a slightly old-fashioned way of playing, but I mean, what do you think? How
Well,
do you react to those sorts of things?
so of course, I mean, I played with Isaac Stern my whole life, and performed with them and did a Bach double with them and many other things. And with Leonard Rose, I played chamber music, and my favorite was doing the Schubert two cello quintet with him. And again, both of those performers have the most remarkable thing is the control of the bow that they both have. So, for instance, when they start, so the most violinists or cellists they go, or and you listen to them, they go. So right away you have the anxiousness, you see, and that's all. It's all in the bow. So when Casals was the master of teaching this, and he would use silly sounds like zai, zig, zai. Okay, what did that mean? That means zai is a long note fading out. Zag, zai. So the way you do that, so the slow notes, the long notes, what we call the meat and potatoes, little bow. And the fast notes, fast bow and lots of bow. And that's how you have projection, you see. So you hear violinists play the Sibelius Concerto, right? You've heard it a million times. So they go, how does that start? Nobody in the audience here, mi fa sol fa. So you have to, Casals would say no. See, and in the audience, you hear the right nuances. And then, of course, that same school didn't have what I call the vegetable vibrato. Okay, so the vegetable vibrato would be. Okay, that's 99% of all string players now. They have this beautiful, fast electric vibrato, which is totally without expression. You see, if you want, the voice is your expression. When I grew up, I listened to Beniamino Gigli, the tenor. That was my violin lesson. Everything I've done since in my life is always the same. It's the voice, the colors. How do they get that? That's what we imitate on the violin. You know, so if I play,
it's not unlike the way that we talk with each other. I mean, we would
no,
never just speak in a monotone like this, or we wouldn't grab anybody's attention. I think your point is
exactly,
you don't apply the same vibrato to every single note. Otherwise, people just start to zone out.
exactly. But you have to be conscious of it. And so when you talk about Isaac Stern, Heifetz, you talk about any of the Nathan Milstein, Misha Elman, doesn't matter. They all studied with one teacher. None of them holds the bow the same way. None of them vibrate the same way, and none of them play the same way. There's a great teacher, and there's a bunch of good talent not being ruined by a teacher who is dogmatic and says this is the only way. So we talked a little bit before about my beliefs. I hate exercises. I hate scales. So how do we get this vibrato that most people play with today? Scales. They go. And there you are. There's your vegetable vibrato. Okay. So if you want to learn the scale, do it in a beautiful piece of music. You know, I'm very sad this year because you've lost concerts. I've lost concerts. I was going to play the 2 Schubert trios just 2 months ago, and right now, I should have been playing 3 Beethoven sonatas. Okay, so the 3 Beethoven sonatas. I mean, it's the world for me. But the first one I play is. Okay, so there you are. So there are your scales, and you have an arpeggio. So why do you have to waste an hour of your time learning scales from something stupid? Learn it from a Beethoven sonata. It's right there. You see? And the next sonata I was going to play is the Spring Sonata. All right, here's your long note and fast notes. So here's the way most people play today, right? Right? Instead of okay. And so you have sol fa mi re do si si la sol. You see, because he says the D twice, the A twice, da 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 da. Yeah. So it's like saying, "What's your name?" I do this in the orchestra all the time. I say, "Hey, you, what's your name?" Daniel. What's your name? Daniel. What's your name? Daniel. Okay, so it's the same thing with composers. If they say the same thing 3 times, they're it's going someplace.
Yeah, there's an intention behind that thought.
Exactly. So if you have 3 D's in a row, there's D D D.
Yeah,
you see. So and this is what we miss with all these exercises. We make automats out of very. So unless you are a talent like Perlman and Shlomo Mintz and Zuckerman, who can overcome the teaching that they had, because nobody can ruin these guys. But if you're not these guys, you're being ruined and making everybody loves them in the orchestra because they're great machines. But they are machines.
Well, talk about an artist who's not a machine. We've got a clip now of David Oistrakh, who,
yes,
by all accounts, and the record proves it. I mean, he had an incredible technique, but he was a force of nature. I mean, he just had a will as a musician that I think comes through so well. Why don't we take a brief moment? This is a piece, of course, which he is very closely aligned because it was written for him. I think it's the first violin concerto of Dmitri Shostakovich, and the bridge, if you will, between the slow movement and the finale is this incredible cadenza that kind of stands alone as its own movement, if you will. It's just a brilliant and beautiful solo cadenza. So nobody on the stage is playing except for the solo violinist. And here's David Oistrakh playing that very cadenza that links the slow to the fast movement in Shostakovich's first violin concerto that was written with David Oistrakh in mind. again, another astonishing example of an artist who clearly has command over the instrument, but also not just in a technical sense, but a truly kind of inhabits the music that was written for him. It's just kind of amazing. Did you ever get a chance to be in the same room as David Oistrakh?
Do we have time?
Yes, I'd love to hear it.
Okay, so the first thing about it, David Oistrakh, is when he made his first tour of the United States, I was there. And I was at Curtis, and it was just finishing. So it was 1959. And he played 3 concertos with every single symphony orchestra that he played with on that tour. Now, physically, if you can imagine what that means, he would play Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, and a Mozart concerto on one night. Then every night, different concertos, not always repeating them. And it was the Russian government who wanted to show him off, because he had already an incredible reputation because of his recordings that had just overtaken the United States. So here's the Russian government really killed him. He had a bad heart, and they just pushed him and pushed him and pushed him. But in all the years that I've heard him play and was with him, I have never heard him miss a note. Not miss a note. I mean, Heifetz, at the end of his life, he missed 2 notes, which was stupid that people would count.
Right.
But Oistrakh was so perfect, and the sound always perfect, and this dark, gorgeous sound. Stern had a beautiful sound, but a little bit more edgy. You see, Oistrakh is like an old port wine. You just can't get more beautiful than that. And he traveled with his wife. He had a son named Igor, and whenever he was out of Russia, Igor had to stay in Russia. And when Igor would go and be in Europe, David had to be in Russia. I mean, the KGB was terrible. They were always with him. So the reason I tell you this story is to set the scene. 1959, the month of April, and he comes to Curtis. And of course, Zimbalist, and he just had this connection. And the secretary of Zimbalist called Michael Tree, myself, and John Daly, who was another violinist in the Guarneri Quartet, to play for Oistrakh. So the 3 of us played for him, and then we went out to lunch. And he didn't speak English, not one word. He spoke a little German, and of course, Ephraim and he were speaking in Russian. But I do okay in German, but I speak Yiddish, and so I tried Yiddish with him, and he spoke Yiddish, no problem. So there we were. I get a job because I was my graduating year. I get a job. My first job is concertmaster of the Ottawa Philharmonic in Canada. Second week I'm there, the soloist is David Oistrakh. Okay, so I get a call from the Russian ambassador, because Ottawa is a embassy city. So I get a call, reception for David Oistrakh. He's going to play. Yampolsky's accompanist is there with him, and please come with your wife. So okay, I go. They're very formal. We go, we get past the KGB, and then we get there's this long line, and at the end of the line is Oistrakh, his wife, Oistrakh, and Yampolsky, the pianist. And I get there, and he sees me, and he starts to shake. He went totally white and started to tremble. I mean, visibly trembling. So I didn't say anything. I just went by. I didn't even know if he would remember me, first of all. So I went right by. Later, I saw Yampolsky, and he speaks English. And I said, "Is Mr. Oistrakh okay?" Oh, he says, he told me what happened. He said he was so afraid you were going to speak Yiddish to him. He says that the KGB doesn't know that he speaks Yiddish. and that he has any kind of feelings for anything Jewish. You know, so that's how afraid he was. Can you imagine?
Well, I can imagine that's kind of how he lived his whole life, because he had the pressures of being an international soloist and interfacing with a lot of Western ensembles and artists.
Being the number one teacher.
Yeah.
He was the number one teacher. He had a full schedule of teaching. They pushed him until he died, and he died because of his heart. Couldn't take it anymore. But he was the greatest violinist that I've ever heard in my life. I've heard them all. I heard Heifetz live. You know, I mean, I'm almost 102, so you know, I've heard them all. And so I'm 86. So,
but I mean, that's such a neat dynamic, because particularly as a concertmaster, you get to sit right under all these great soloists that come through and perform with the orchestra, and that's a unique chair to be in, because you really you make that connection between what the soloist is doing and through the back of the strings.
And it's so much fun, Daniel. I had Nathan Milstein playing Glazunov. Okay, nobody knows Glazunov today, but Glazunov was the concerto that made my career, because whenever I auditioned for concertmaster, I always played Glazunov. Everybody else played Tchaikovsky, and everybody was so tired of Tchaikovsky. So that when I played Glazunov, you could just see, oh, something. You know, so it was a breath of fresh air, and so I knew Glazunov very well. Here's Milstein playing Glazunov with St. Louis Symphony. So at the rehearsal, there's a very difficult passage. And I looked at him, I said, you know, that's a very bad fingering you're using. And I showed him the fingering that I was using. And he just, you know, he was like a child when he would make fun. So, you know, that night was the concert, right? So this is the most difficult passage. It took me a year to learn this passage, you know, but it's I can't play it anymore, but I can't. It's gone. But so he starts to play that thing, turns around towards me, public there, and he plays my fingering.
Wow.
Yes. And then he smiles and turns around. And that is the mind that Milstein had. You know, he never wrote down a fingering. Never wrote down a fingering. Everything was improvised. You know who else is? Jamie Laredo is like that. Never writes down a fingering. Just just all here.
Well, first of all, the sheer chutzpah of you saying, yeah, well, you should try my fingering. You telling Milstein how he should figure that hard passage in the Glazunov, and then the utter respect. I mean, what a show of being a mensch by turning around and showing you. Yeah, you know what?
He was terrific. Yeah, there was another one with Henrik Schering, who was totally the opposite. Henrik Schering was the most difficult human being to live with ever, and he played Brahms' violin concerto. So the program was, this is St. Louis again. So the program was Brahms first half and Ein Heldenleben the second half.
Wow.
So Ein Heldenleben, of course, has all these concertmaster solos.
Concertmaster solos,
yes. And they're like Paganini. I mean, it's just, you know, it's just incredibly hard. And so he plays the Brahms, and now I know Oistrakh, Schering for years. Yes. And he finishes it. I come out for intermission, you know, to tune the orchestra. And right there is Schering sitting in the front row, right by my seat. So I turned around and I said, "You son of a bitch." I said, "How can you do that?"
No pressure, no pressure.
That's what I said to him. I was so mad. So then he didn't say anything. He just impassive.
Oh, wow.
And then I played it and I left. He comes back to my room and he says, "You know," he says, your vibrato is faster than mine." That's what he said. It has nothing to do with reality. You know?
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
But I mean, normally, you know, most people need to understand that, after a concerto soloist plays a big concerto and probably an encore afterwards, if things go well, they have their coat on and they're back to the hotel and having a drink or putting on their slippers and calling it a night. It's very unlikely for a concert soloist, particularly of Schering's import, to stick around, number one, just to hear the second half of the concert, but much less to sit in the very front row, where he's rubbing elbows with audience members who have just heard him play and staring at the concertmaster doing, one of the
Yes.
most important concertmaster pieces of all the symphonic literature.
Oh, I mean, after a while, you can't think of him because you're just so busy in that piece. But the thing is that he was always kind to me afterwards. And when I went to live in Europe, when I took the job in Portugal, I get a phone call, but maybe 3 weeks that I'm living in Portugal. And this voice speaking Portuguese, and I said, "I'm sorry, I've only been here 3 weeks. I don't speak Portuguese yet. But if you like, I can speak in Italian or French or German or English, whatever you like. I hope you can speak one of those languages." He said, "You've been," in English, he said to me, "You've been there for 3 weeks and you don't speak the language yet?" And it was Sharon. Yes. So he did a lot of master classes for me with my festivals. And sometimes he was great and sometimes he was just horrible. He was just strangest, but what a violinist. Yeah. And if you want to hear the Bach violin sonatas, I just got, by the way, the new edition of Bach, Henley edition, where you get the original. This is Bach original, just printed. Okay.
Yep.
But not a single fingering,
right?
Not a single bowing. It's like looking at the Bible, written by God. It's just great, and so I'm enjoying restudying Bach now. That's what I'm doing.
So when you go through this Henley edition, are you going to be adding in your fingerings, or are you going to try to kind of keep it clean and come back to the page?
No, eventually I'll put it in, but probably not for a year.
Okay.
I just want to absorb, try things, and then decide. You get into habits,
right?
And especially things that you play by memory,
right?
Because I'm limited now. I can't practice 8 hours a day. I have a life, and
you're in Lakeside. I mean, who wants to practice 8 hours a day? You need to get outside and enjoy it.
Yes, and when you come, you'll see I have paintings in here by every Lakesider imaginable. I have wonderful, wonderful paintings. It's a great place for that, and the people here are just so wonderful. And
that's the thing that really touched me in my first year with the orchestra, is that I would, anywhere I walk, anywhere I go, people recognize the work that the orchestra is doing and say, "We really appreciate you and we really appreciate the orchestra." It's such an integral part of the Lakeside experience for so many people. And I feel actually frankly humbled by that, but I also feel a lot of responsibility to make sure that these traditions continue, and that we're mounting important musical seasons, because it's a great atmosphere to listen to Bach and Mozart and Handel and Tchaikovsky. It's such a beautiful place, number one, and number two, when the musicians are there, they're there kind of on a kind of half vacation and half orchestra season. So there's a nice relaxed feeling about the music making, but we're also very serious. We want to make sure that the concerts that we're giving and the music we're presenting to everybody is really of a top quality and a top order. So
and you're challenged because you have to give 2 concerts a week, and
right.
You're challenged with the number of rehearsals that you have. So it's very, very, very hard to do what you did, and you've done it. I mean, but it's very hard. I don't know if people realize how difficult it is to put a program on in 2.5 days.
Well, believe me, I miss that. I miss it very much. We would be in the thick of that season right now, and it's just like you alluded to earlier. It's a piece of our soul is connected to the ability to play for other people. I mean, of course, there's a great deal of satisfaction that comes from practicing and spending time in our practice rooms. But at the end of the day, We want to play for other people and communicate.
I have to admit I'm not a guy who gets depressed, so I can't use that word, but I'm morose a lot of the times because there's a part of me that doesn't share. I'm used to sharing, you know, and you are. And when you take that stick in your hand, it has an emotional meaning. You know, the moment I have I conduct also, as you know, and when I conduct, that's my bow. It's my whatever. I hold it, and you know, music has got to emanate from that gesture, and make it that you communicate. And unlike the violin responds to what I do. My stick makes no noise. Your stick makes no noise, and the only voice is their voice. And so, how do you make your stick become a joint affair? And that's the beauty of conducting, is to make music together, to invite the orchestra to make music with you, not to impose it.
Yeah.
If you impose the music, they'll do it, but they'll do it like my electric vibrato. It'll be a mechanical response, and to get a response which is emotional and that the audience will feel, that's when you invite the orchestra to make music with you. So that's not so easy to teach to young conductors.
No, but that's the
I don't
secret.
consider you young anymore, by the way.
I'll take anything I can get. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think I really conceive of my job as trying to make the situation so comfortable enough that you can play beautifully, yet also assured enough that there's no question where we're going to go in the next measure.
Right.
I really want people to, you know, and they may not agree with my interpretation, they may not agree with my tempi, but they'll feel comfortable enough, and we'll have had enough rehearsal to execute and to bring the piece to life in that. Because let's face it, you know, next week it'll be a different Brahms symphony, or next week it'll be a different Tchaikovsky violin concerto. So, you know, it's a fleeting art, but it's also one that's so memorable when all the elements conspire, and it becomes really special for that one performance. And that's the other thing I love about Lakeside, is that you come as you are. Families bring, you know, grandparents bring their grandchildren, parents bring their parents, couples come, singles come. It really doesn't matter. You come in, you sit in Hoover, you sit out on a picnic blanket, and you enjoy beautiful music, and that's what it's all about.
Right, totally right. And you know, you alluded to all the greats that played Roystraks, Rose, Casals, and so on. None of them resembled one another.
Right.
They all, and that's the thing about conducting also. I mean, we play the same Brahms symphony, but according to who's conducting, it's going to be a different performance. And the greats all have their way of doing it. And the truth is, I've played and under so many great conductors, and sometimes beforehand I'd say, I don't really like the way this guy does anything. You know, this is not my idea of Beethoven, for instance. You know. And then I play under him, and I do exactly what he wants me to do. I do it with all of my heart. I give everything to it. I'm exhausted doing what he wants me to do. And that's the great musician, because you can't escape that, you know, aura that they of making music. And so they make it, this is the only way it can be.
Right.
There is no other way.
Right.
Afterwards, you can discuss it.
Exactly.
but not then. And if you don't have that, which I have with a lot of people, you know, the performance is over, and I said, let's go to Tufts and get some ice cream.
Let's get some ice cream. Absolutely. It's a great post-concert tradition at Lakeside.
Exactly.
And I can't wait till we are back together and we get to share some more. Max, let me just take this opportunity to thank you for being so generous with your spirit and with your time and with your experiences and your knowledge about music and about life. And it's been just a thrill to get a chance to talk to you and get to know you a little bit better. And I know that our audience here at Lakeside really appreciates you and everything that you bring to the community. So a big thank you, a big remote, socially distanced hug from my home to yours.
Same here.
And I can't wait till we're together.
A big kiss to you, Mary. We both are blessed with wonderful Marys.
Indeed we are.
and we have great children. So what
Yeah.
more can you have? Yes, and
Max
we have.
Rabinovitsj, cheers to you. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for watching this edition of LSO virtually. And of course, this is all to keep us connected and looking forward to the time when we can all be back together again and sharing music together with the Lakeside Symphony Orchestra. Thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.